Okay. Yeah, so hopefully you can see my little mushroom scarf here. So I was all excited to do this. So I did post about this mushroom podcast a little bit earlier, and hopefully everyone got a chance to write some of the topics that they're looking forward to seeing. I have a nice little studio here, and I plan on interviewing experts and having people call in, Skype in, however we can do it here, so we get the best people talking about either their products or about their research, everything, so that we can all start these conversations so that we can use mushrooms for a better life. So I'll talk a little bit personally about my experience with mushrooms. So again, it's very rare that scientists actually will talk about their drug use. So thankfully, the psychedelic community is very inviting and encouraging and supportive. So I feel comfortable talking about my use. So I've actually dealt with PTSD and depression for many years, and especially after I was raided for cannabis use in Los Angeles in 2013, and so it was something I struggled with. PTSD, for those of you who don't know, is actually post-traumatic stress disorder. It's when you basically can't forget a traumatic event, and it causes you to have fear, anxiety, depression, and really maladaptive behaviors, nightmares. For me, that meant like hiding under tables and desks and small spaces. I like sitting in closets, really weird behavior, and it's something that most people are associate with, say, veterans, right? So veterans go through really traumatic things when they're shooting people and in wars and things like that. And so when they come home, they're not adjusted and they keep reliving those traumatic memories. But there's a lot of ways you can get PTSD. So you can get it from sexual assault, you can get it if you're a policeman or a firefighter, because, you know, getting shot at or going into raging fires and seeing other people die is really traumatic. So there's lots of ways to get trauma, there's lots of ways to get PTSD. Most people are actually undiagnosed for it. But the really, really cool thing about mushrooms is that it's a solution, just like cannabis is. And I don't want to disregard any of the work that I've ever talked about with cannabis. Cannabis is great for so many things, but psychedelics like mushrooms are also another tool in the toolbox for, especially for what we call sort of like treatment-resistant conditions. So PTSD and depression in particular, the mental health disorders can be very tricky to treat. We know that, you know, all the different prescription drugs out there from Prozac on down, a lot of people don't respond to any of them. And then we offer cannabis as a solution. Okay, well, if this didn't work for you, try CBD or try CBD and THC. For some people, it still doesn't completely get rid of their depression or PTSD. A lot of people with PTSD have actually explored other options, including psychedelics like ayahuasca, which aren't available, of course, in the United States, being Schedule I drugs. Mushrooms is a Schedule I drug, so I don't want to, I don't want to make you think that it's something that you can go pick up, you know, like the food mushrooms. Like psilocybin mushrooms are illegal, they are Schedule I. They're not sold in dispensaries or anything like cannabis is. But what's nice about them is that there's multiple ways you can use mushrooms. So a lot of people think when we're talking about psychoactive or psychedelic mushrooms that we're talking about consuming a large dose of these mushrooms and getting really high and really out of it. And there's a context for that, and that's great. And you can also do that with therapists and work through some emotional problems, but or go to a festival, enjoy music, whatever you want to do with psychoactive mushrooms. But there's also a form of mushroom taking called microdosing. And that term maybe you've heard of before from cannabis, where we talk about microdosing cannabis. That's taking tiny amounts of THC, such small amounts that it won't make you high, but it still has anti-inflammatory and anti-pain properties. Well, there's the same thing with mushrooms. You can actually take small amounts of mushrooms and it won't get you out of it. In fact, you won't really feel anything. And in fact, you know, the only way that you know that you're getting those benefits is that you feel an improvement in mood, you feel an improvement in focus, an improvement in creativity. For a lot of people, it's really the thing that shuts off suicidal thoughts. So microdosing mushrooms in small doses every couple of days is the one thing that really helps people that haven't responded to other treatments, whether they're cannabis, whether they're traditional pharmaceutical treatments. So for me, I actually had just really, really horrible depression sometimes, that, you know, if I wasn't stressed out, cannabis was really good at controlling most of my anxiety and depression. But then, you know, I live a pretty stressful life. I travel all the time. Sometimes I work 18-hour days. I would actually say probably most of the time I work 18-hour days. So there was a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. My brain was just burnt out. I had no zest for living, and you know, all those PTSD symptoms sort of reemerged. And for me, microdosing mushrooms has been the one way that I've actually not only been able to overcome all that depression, but really come into my own. I don't know if you guys know this, but I finally published my book, which is called Vitamin Weed, a 4-step plan to preventing and reversing endocannabinoid deficiency. I tried to write that book for 5 years, and it was actually my second book. I'm gonna give you a little secret. Mushrooms is actually the reason why that book got written. So I was able to get out of my depression, get out of my funk, and be able to say, okay, I'm ready to become who I'm supposed to be. I'm ready to tell these stories. I'm ready to educate the world. I'm ready for people to see the real me, and I'm not scared of myself. I'm confident. I'm ready to take on the world. And so you see, like right now, I'm on camera, and it's taken a long time for me to feel comfortable being on camera and talking to people. So this is a big shift for me, and it's something that I am just really proud of doing. And for me, being authentic and be able to share with you the reason why I feel so engaged and ready and happy to talk to you guys in this very personal way is really, again, that mushrooms being able to help me connect with you guys. So there are so many comments on here. I don't know how to scroll all of them down. Oh my God. Let's see. Let's see. If there are any doctors willing to try alternative medicines, I'd be open. Yeah, so one of the things I want to talk about is actually how we do psychedelics responsibly. So there's two schools of thought right now. One being that psychedelics really should only be used in a therapist's office, and that's sort of the MAPS model. So MAPS is the biggest nonprofit out there, and I do think that psychedelics can be used with therapists, and it's actually been proven with MDMA and some of their other psychedelic drugs in clinical trials that when you work with a therapist in this very specific context, you can actually sort of unload so much baggage and work through your problems that, you know, you're basically doing like 20 years of psychotherapy in one session, and that is really helpful. But I do think that there's other ways to do psychedelics. For some people, you know, having that spiritual, you know, experience on a really large dose of mushrooms in the right context, they surrounded by friends or with music or whatever it is, may be enough to adjust their brain, rewire it, and make them, you know, help them deal with whatever they're going through and be able to be a much brighter and happier and fulfilled person. For other people, again, microdosing might be the answer. And technically, you know, I don't think a doctor is necessarily required for you to take small psychoactive doses of mushrooms. And here's why. Similar to cannabis, right, there's no way to overdose on mushrooms. And most people are actually shocked by that. It's actually one of the safest drugs to take. We all know, you know, you can overdose on alcohol very easily. Any of the stimulants like cocaine or methamphetamine, you can. Even prescription drugs like Xanax or opioids like tramadol have, you know, a very small limit of, okay, you've taken one too many pills, now you're going to stop breathing and you're going to, you know, have an overdose and end up, you know, either going to the ER or needing Narcan, which is an overdose remedy, or you might die. With mushrooms, there have been really no stories of people that, you know, have overdosed and died. There have been, you know, situations where any psychedelic drug or any drug in particular, I mean, even alcohol can change your behavior or change your perception of things so that you might do behaviors you wouldn't do, but that's not necessarily the drug causing an overdose, right? That's it causing a behavior change. So I think there's many ways that people can responsibly take mushrooms, and we should start exploring that. There's actually a lot of resources online. There's groups like the Third Wave, which is a new group that's been doing education on microdosing. There's, you know, research labs and clinical trials all over the country right now looking at psychedelics and mushrooms. I think there's 20 clinical trials right now looking at mushrooms and their health benefits, from depression to migraine. There's one right now, actually, this is really cool. So there's a group called Cluster Busters, and they look like cluster headaches, which are a little bit different than migraines, but they're really debilitating. And that group actually raised $2 million to do a clinical trial on psilocybin mushrooms for cluster headaches. And they're actually doing a conference in Denver in October. So that's definitely something you should check out, Cluster Busters, if you're interested in psilocybin for cluster headaches. So there's so many different ways, and I see somebody here stating that they are dealing with alcoholism, turned to the mushrooms. They have helped so much. Yeah, that is one thing I keep hearing over and over again, that people that have had these addictive issues and just have had no relief, and they have not been able to, whether it's therapy, whether it's just them trying to do cold turkey, they have not been able to overturn their addictive behaviors, and then they use mushrooms. Maybe it was once, maybe it was twice, and all of a sudden their behaviors change permanently. And I'm an addiction neuroscientist. I can tell you that this is not what you see with therapy. This is not what you see with any of the treatments for alcohol or drug abuse out there, and it's so promising. We don't have to send people to Peru or some other place to go do ayahuasca treatments. With mushrooms, we can really use these substances safely in the United States, in our own home, or in other contexts that make us feel safe, and it can change our behavior for the long term. Addiction is a potentially deadly disease. We know depression is. So it's so important that we have these discussions right now about using mushrooms properly and legalizing them so that more people have access to this. I've talked to a lot of people, and one of their biggest concerns is doing something that's illegal. And, there's a clearer fear of that. Imagine if you've had a DUI. Imagine if you're on probation. The last thing you want to do is be caught with an illegal drug in your system or in your house. And so it's really important that we do decriminalize these drugs so that everyone can feel safe accessing them and using them for better mental and physical health. So let's see, major depression and PTSD. Yeah, I touched on that a little. So what we're going to do for this podcast, there's so many things to talk about with mushrooms. Like literally, what we're probably going to do is each week touch on a different thing. So one week maybe PTSD, one week be migraines, one week be anxiety, one week be medicinal mushrooms that aren't necessarily psychoactive but can help extend your life or provide focus. I actually wasn't, say, the biggest mushroom expert my whole life. I really got into this when I gave a keynote at the Telluride Mushroom Festival, which I think just happened. So I gave a keynote a couple years ago, and I really got to meet all these other mycologists that were amazing, and starting to learn about the properties of medicinal mushrooms, as well as, psychoactive mushrooms, which I was pretty well schooled on. But I actually have been increasing my consumption of regular mushrooms because they do actually activate your brain. There's sugars in mushrooms that help actually activate your hippocampus, which is your learning and memory center, and they actually can change your perception of memories and experiences. And then there's also medicinal mushrooms, which if you take them have really cool properties. They can do everything from repairing your DNA to increasing your attention by increasing dopamine. There's just so many fun things. So there's of course new research happening all the time. So I hope that this can be a place where we have these conversations. What I want to do is have people write questions here, and then if you submit the questions, within 24 hours of the weekly show, what I'll do is go through as many questions as I can on that topic, and then, we'll answer them and hopefully have a little discussion to bring some experts in, as I said. But I really think that there's so much to talk about. There's a lot of myths and misconceptions to talk about. So let's see. Yeah, you guys are coming in here with the answers, or questions, sorry. Let's see. Yeah, the dangers, yeah. And I do want to talk about this as a scientist. Of course, no drug is ever 100% safe, and no drug should be consumed by everyone. I'm actually a big fan of that. I tell people about, whether THC or CBD is appropriate for them. Psychedelics, the same thing. Of course, there's some people that shouldn't. Of course, it's lower risk than most drugs, but there, of course, are some people that should not take them. And especially, people that may have mental health issues. Again, we're talking about using them for depression, but there's some other mental health disorders that it may not be a good fit with. But there's other ones that are actually really promising. One of the things that I really loved was looking at borderline personality disorder. So there's not a lot of treatments for that, or treatments that work well, and actually for that personality disorder, which about 5% of our population has, whether they're diagnosed or not, it's actually one way to really work on people's perception of themselves and others, and sort of reframe themselves so that they don't have that personality disorder anymore, because it's one of those disorders that's really resistant to psychotherapy. So we're finding there's so many different applications of mushrooms, so super fun. Okay, cultivation. So I do want to point out that, you know, I am a scientist, so one of the things I do is research on humans. I don't grow anything, and sometimes that disappoints a lot of people. So people expect me to grow weed and cannabis or grow mushrooms. I don't grow anything. I really have a bad green thumb. I just bought my first house plant, so I'm trying to keep things alive. But for the cultivation part, I will definitely bring in some experts to talk about that, because there are people that do that way better. In fact, we actually at Denver for psilocybin had somebody who has his own mushroom cultivation company, Alex Dorr. So he was amazing. Hopefully we still have the footage from that. If you guys haven't seen that, I have BPD. Okay, perfect. Yeah, there's a lot of things that people don't even realize are out there. One of the new papers that I actually saw was psychedelics as not antioxidants, but anti-inflammatories. So most people think about, you know, naproxen or Tylenol or even cannabis as anti-inflammatory, but a new study actually showed that psychedelic drugs are anti-inflammatories. And this makes sense when you think about people that have autoimmune disorders. So actually I had a woman write to me about having rheumatoid arthritis, and she said she was treated by microdosing mushrooms, and the standard literature will say that that's not what it does. But we actually have a lot of people with Lyme's disease, with fibromyalgia, with other diseases saying that their diseases are not treated by normal pain medications or other prescriptions. It's actually been treated by these serotonergic mushrooms. And so that's really exciting. One, because I think that there's mechanisms for pain relief and for, you know, body rebalance that we don't even know about. But two, most illnesses actually have an emotional component, which psilocybin mushrooms actually helps heal. So if you can tell your body to heal its emotional pain, it'll help stop expressing that physically, and you'll really start to heal. And as somebody who suffers from fibromyalgia, I will tell you that if you can heal the stress and you can heal the long-term effects of stress in your body and start to cope and understand where that pain comes from, you can start getting a lot better. And I don't know how long it will take for some of these diseases to go away, but you will see improvement with them. So that's what this whole journey is about. So there's so many comments in here. I'm so excited. Okay, let's see. I see one comment here. Really want to know more about the use of mushrooms in dementia, what types of dementia it is good for, and the benefits. That's actually a really interesting thing. So I'm not too knowledgeable about mushrooms and dementia. Again, my experience has been more cannabis and CBD for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and that's something I actually really would like to know more about. Definitely more of the older population is really, really interested in this. I actually had an amazing conversation with a woman that had tripped back in the day, and she had no idea what microdosing was or how it could help, and she was struggling with depression. And so I was just like, yeah, we need to talk a little bit more. It'll help change your life. But for dementia, I'm not too sure. So let's see. So of course, one of the nice things about this is that we're all learning, right? We're all experts and we're all teachers, and that's the beauty of the psychedelic community. So I love that you're sharing these questions, because one of the things I'll be able to do is go and find the experts and get their advice and share a little bit of that with you. Again, you can't be an expert in everything, but we're all learning together. So, okay. Yes, shroomery.org. Yeah, I do want to give that as a shout out for mushroom cultivation info. There are a lot of good websites online, and thankfully they've popped up in the last couple of years. But again, for some of the things like microdosing, it's just funny because there's a lot of still like, there's a lack of information on some of these things. For example, like clinical trials have really focused on pure psilocybin pills. Again, the mushroom, right? If you take mushrooms, 100% of it's not psilocybin. That's the active ingredient. So in the clinical trials, they've just focused on the active ingredient, just like in cannabis, the active ingredient is THC. So in the clinical trials, it's different when you take just pure THC than cannabis. So taking pure psilocybin is different than taking mushrooms, right? So we've had clinical trials looking at psilocybin for depression and terminal cancer and other things. We haven't really had clinical trials on taking mushrooms. And then we haven't had clinical trials on taking microdoses of mushrooms. So a lot of the information so far has been really anecdotal. We've had some researchers, saying, fill out the survey and tell us about your use, like Dr. Fadiman, who's, has the famous microdosing protocol. But, we still don't have a lot of stuff published, and, it's important for us to do as much research as possible and, sort of track how we're doing. And part of my work has really been trying to standardize, experiences with sort of over-the-counter drugs. So making sure that patients can sort of baseline where they were before they started something, whether it was cannabis, whether it was psychedelics, and say, okay, this is how my Alzheimer's is now. Now I'm going to take this, this cannabis or this other drug and see how it influences my memory, see how it influences my mood. And you can do that with all sorts of conditions. And it's a lot of work to sort of standardize that with technology, but that's what we have to do because we have so many people saying, okay, help me with my anxiety, help me with my depression, help me with this and that. But we sort of need the numbers. We need to know, if you take this many grams of mushrooms, at this protocol, whether it's, once every 3 days, for 3 months, that you're going to see this kind of benefit or this kind of relief. Right now, we're still in the very much the young stage of this field. So there's a lot of people saying, yeah, it worked for me, but, it's hard to convince the medical field in general of this when we're like, yeah, it worked for me, but everyone's sort of doing it in secret because of, the illegality and the Schedule 1 nature of it. So, the more of us that come together and do these research studies or talk about our experiences, the better it'll be. It's sort of like when we all had to start talking and speaking up about our cannabis use with our doctors, and now doctors are asking the experts, well, what about cannabis? Wouldn't it be nice 5 years from now when we have doctors saying, all my patients are asking me about the mushrooms, like, could you tell me about this? We're not there yet, but give it 5 years. I think that we will be, so. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of people are on here asking about depression. Yeah, and I mean, that's not surprising. 300 million people worldwide have depression. So it's one of the things that is least amenable to prescription treatment. And I want to talk about this actually a lot because this was my field. So I worked in a molecular psychiatry department for 5 years, and molecular psychiatry is exactly what you guessed it to be. It was trying to discover new drugs to treat depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, anxiety, and so on, ADHD. It was funny because my work actually showed a lot of the pharmaceuticals for those diseases were ineffective or harmful. For example, Adderall, which we use to treat ADHD, actually decreases neurogenesis or birth of new brain cells. Which is crazy because now we know things like cannabis, CBD, or even microdosing mushrooms can actually increase attention and treat symptoms of ADHD. There's actually many people that have microdosed mushrooms and say that they don't need their Adderall anymore, they don't want it, and that microdosing is much more effective. Also, if, microdosing mushrooms is not even an option for you because you don't have access to it or you don't want, an illegal drug, cordyceps is actually an amazing mushroom supplement. It increases dopamine and energy and focus, and you can find those supplements online in Amazon. I actually personally take a brand that is made by Paul Stamets, who's like a world famous mycologist, and I think he just keynoted at Telluride Mushroom Festival. And it's so funny because you can actually feel like there's most supplements you will take and you're like, did it even work? It blew my mind when I took this supplement, and I actually, felt energized. I felt focused, and for fibromyalgia is very hard to sometimes feel like you have any energy or focus. One of the main symptoms is called fibrofog. So you're sort of like brain, wake up, here's coffee. Nope, not waking up. Nothing is waking me up like mentally. Nope, it's not happening. But with cordyceps, actually, when you take that in the morning, it is definitely a kick for your brain, and it will jumpstart it in a way that caffeine doesn't. So it's actually an amazing mushroom that, even though it's not a psychoactive mushroom, it's a mushroom that should be part of your regimen, especially if you want to go that extra mile and be as productive and as creative as you want to be. So great nootropic. So let's see. Any questions? I teach all my doctors about cannabis. Yes. I like that comment. I need access. Yeah. So I would love to know where everyone is from that's listening right now. There's a whole bunch of people here live. And of course, this is going to be on the Facebook page. And I'm probably going to start editing this too, so we can put it on a bunch of other platforms, especially when we're doing those question and answer pieces. But I want to know where everyone is from. Are people here from Colorado? What state are you from? What state or city? So I mean, that's one of the cool things is that, you know, I do travel all across the United States. So we got Durango, okay. Cleveland, Ohio. Yeah, we have a lot of places where you guys are not going to have mushroom decriminalization for a little bit. You know, having talked with a lot of people across the United States, we're going to do the decrim bill first here in Denver, Colorado. But, you know, the next stop's probably Oregon has a group that's working on it in 2020. I think they already decriminalized almost all drugs from cocaine and psilocybin mushrooms, etc. But they're looking to actually make like a mushroom like caregiver system there. But in California, we're probably going to look at a city or two maybe trying for decriminalization in 2020. But the sad part is that, you know, we're waiting for the rest of the world, right? Or the rest of the United States. So there's so many little pockets that are very interested in decriminalizing. There's some groups that are whispering about like, hey, can we get this something done, something on the ballot for 2020? The hard part about decriminalization is it's much easier to do it on the state level if your state legislators were on board, which most of them are not. They're like, let's not, you know, legalize more hippie drug stuff. We don't need that. But the good thing about city by city decriminalization is that when you look at the maps, right, we have these states that are red, but sometimes we have these blue, very liberal cities, right? In those liberal cities, you might be able to get decriminalization of mushrooms passed. And so if you live in a state that's very conservative, your best hope is to do it city by city. So one of the things I'm really proud of is that besides being part of this campaign, we're actually forming a nonprofit called SPORE, which is the Society for Psychedelic Outreach, Reform and Education. And what that is actually a framework for supporting mushroom legalization efforts across the country. So once we're done in Denver, and hopefully we're very successful in May 2019, we're hoping to help support other groups do this in other cities and states. And really that's, you know, by supporting with technology, with our legal wording, because we worked really hard on trying to make this airtight, so if the voters vote on it, that we can implement in these other cities. But also providing the education to legislators, because most legislators don't know anything, or if they think about it like, you know, oh no, all these people are going to do crazy trips, like, thinking like an acid trip or something, and not realizing that people can do microdosing or do other things, and it's generally very safe. Okay, there are a lot of questions too about the borderline personality disorder. What I'm going to do actually is schedule that out, and I'm going to put a little schedule too of different episodes, so if you have interest in different conditions, that you can tune in on those days. Not be like, oh no, like I hope she's going to talk about this, because I know we all have limited time. We're super busy like in our lives, so you definitely want to tune in for what's you know, meaningful for you. So I'm going to create sort of a content schedule, and hopefully be able to get those experts and everything on there, and so you know when to tune in for what you're looking for. So and I hopefully will have some worksheets too. I think it's really important that we have these sort of like talking points, especially when we're talking to our loved ones, or we're talking to other people that don't believe this is, you know, even potentially medicinal at all, right? If you talk to your mom, she's like, no, mushrooms, that's, you're just trying to get high. And you actually talk about, you know, hey, you can use this for your anxiety, it might even be good for you. I think that having these sheets with just some of the facts and some of the references is really helpful. I did a lot of that for the cannabis work, and it just made it easier for people to have conversations. So I should start a podcast if I don't have one. I don't have one, guys. This is my first foray actually into talking to anyone. I've actually talked about doing some podcasts right now. I don't think I've shared this with anyone. I actually am creating a whole bunch of online courses on Teachable right now for cannabis, but I'm planning on rolling out some ones on psychedelics too with some partners. And what I've done really is partner with one like really strong expert so that there's some science information that I film and then they do the other part. And we also offer health coaching services through that too. So you have your self-guided course, so you can learn as much as you want. You have worksheets, so you may tracking your progress and everything, whether it's, you know, for pelvic pain or for fibromyalgia or weight loss or better sex or whatever it is you're looking for. But then if you need more help and you really want faster results, you know, you can also work with us in a coaching sense. What's really important about this stuff, I think with the mental health stuff, we're talking about reducing anxiety or depression. I think it is important to have a guide to answer any of your questions or to look for drug interactions and things like that. But that's one of the things I'm doing. So I'm going to actually be filming a lot of content. So it's sort of nice to like get out of my shell right now with you guys. So thank you so much for spending time with me here. I do actually hope on doing some radio stuff too. I'm not in Denver. I'm actually in Los Angeles. I moved 2 months ago, and you know, it was a hard thing for me because I really wanted to be in Denver. I love my Denver family and the Denver psychedelic community and cannabis community. But I did want to share, I actually had severe health problems. I had a lung collapse and lung clots and everything. When I moved to Denver, it was really, really hard on me. So it was really hard to breathe. And every time I breathed, I like had pain in my chest and I always felt dizzy and out of breath. And my doctors were like, yeah, you're going to shave some years off your life if you stay here. So I moved to Los Angeles from where I'm from. And I don't have any more pain in my lungs. I'm at like sea level. So it was one of those hard things for me where, you know, where you're living is actually killing you, you have to make that choice. But I'm happy here and I'm actually close to all the media channels and everything. So like there's lots of radio and like video places. So hopefully we'll be able to shoot things. Like for example, if you guys know about the cannabis content I do on Green Flower Media, that's like a studio that's like an hour and a half away. And they are happy and also psychedelic friendly. So hopefully I'll start the conversation there. It's even possible that I could actually film a live type of talk show there. So there's a lot of opportunities here, and I just love it because, you know, the opportunity to have these conversations, you know, as a scientist next door, hopefully you guys feel like that way. Like, I just want to be able to talk to your mom, talk to your boss, like, about drugs, and it's not a scary thing, you know, and I hate even talking about mushrooms, like, drugs, because it's not. It's, to me, it's like a vitamin, just like cannabis or CBD is, you know. Mushrooms should be part of, you know, our kitchen, part of our, you know, our medicine cabinet, because they have a place there. We're all stressed out. We all have trauma. Like, I cannot find one person in this world that didn't have something crappy happen to them or is about to happen to them, because life is messy, you know. Life is so messy. It's so traumatic. You know, and the human experience is suffering, and thankfully mushrooms is the one thing that can help us suffer a little less or let go of that, and, you know, take that pain and turn it into something beautiful. And, you know, that's what it's really about. Mushrooms, cannabis, all those different psychedelics are really about helping us not only survive life but thrive with life. And yeah, there's so many nice little components here. It's like tea, herbs, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's just so funny because I love cannabis. People talk about cannabis as the gateway drug, and it's sort of funny because they're talking about it as like a gateway drug to like heroin or meth or like cocaine or something, but it's sort of funny. For a lot of people, it's actually the gateway to like Eastern medicine. So people that use cannabis all of a sudden start realizing that they're using like toxic cleaning chemicals, and then they turn to like Dr. Bronner's soap or, you know, hemp clothing and, you know, essential oils instead of Xanax. So it's sort of funny. There is a gateway effect when you start using psychedelic drugs, right? You start becoming more mindful. You start becoming more conscientious or empathetic. One of the things that people have talked about, I just want to make sure we're not going over here. Oh, it's fine. Is that, you know, psychedelics, specifically mushrooms, help you become more open. And when you become more open, you're more likely to think about your life and how it impacts others. So there's so much that we can learn from mushrooms, and we can learn from each other as we're journeying together. So it's about 5 PST, so 5:40, 6:40. Okay, sorry, time zone problems here. So I do want to wrap this up. So what I would love for you guys to do, since you're already on the Denver for psilocybin page, please throw down in the comments, who you want me to interview. If you'd like me to interview you, if you want to share your story, that's what this is all about. Because it's not just about experts. You don't need a PhD or an MD to be an expert in psychedelics, because we're also new in this. So if you have been, for example, microdosing yourself for 5 years and you've cured yourself from Lyme's disease or some other thing, or you're a veteran that now has a better life because of this, I want to hear from you, and I want to talk to you, and I want to highlight, your survival story, and hopefully that story will inspire others. So please let me know. Give either privately message the page with your contact information, or put it out there if you're fine sharing that. I do want to talk to each and every one of you and hear your story and why you're about this, because we're all starting together. Like literally everyone here is part of that revolution, and you're going to change everything, because by tuning in and plugging in, you are going to tell other people, and they're going to tell other people, and we're all going to just be on this better journey together. So I want to thank you guys so much for your support, tuning in for the very first episode of Mushroom Mondays, and hopefully there'll be a lot more glitter and exciting stuff to share. And hopefully too, I'm gonna have some giveaways. Thankfully with mushrooms, we can't give away psychedelic mushrooms on this podcast, unless I'm in another country or something. But hopefully there are some mushroom supplements and books and things like that I'm hoping to help promote and share with you guys, so you can get all the knowledge that you're craving. So I want to thank you guys so much, and tune in here next week at 6 p.m. MST, and I am going to get to all of your questions. No more intro stuff. We're going to dive right in and get learning. So thank you guys so much. I'm Dr. Michele Ross, and have a great Monday and a great week. Thank you.